Joined now at the library desk by Michael Sandel, author of Democracy's Discontent. Most notably, it turns out, we just found out, he gave Juliet Kayyem a B in his class, which is a mark that will stay with him for a long time. Here's just a few of his accolades, Marjorie. A rock star moralist, the world's most influential living philosopher. His legendary Harvard course, Justice, is freely available online and has been viewed by tens of millions of people.
This time you're a transplant surgeon, and you have 5 patients, each in desperate need of an organ transplant in order to survive. And you have no organ donors. And then it occurs to you that in the next room, there's a healthy guy who came in for a checkup. He's taking a nap. You could go in very quietly, yank out the 5 organs, that person would die, but you could save the 5. How many would do it?
His most recent book is The Tyranny of Merit, Can We Find the Common Good? And tomorrow night at GBH in Brighton, he'll deliver the inaugural Ralph Lowell Lecture in partnership with the John F. Kennedy Library and GBH's Forum Network for free tickets, and you really, really want to be there. Free tickets to attend the events or to watch online, you go to gbh.org/events. Michael Sandel, it's great to see you again. Thanks so much for being here.
Good to be with you, Jim.
Okay.
Marjorie.
Well, it's good to be with you, too. I'm a little intimidated here, but I've been reading a lot of your work over the last few days, and correct me if I'm wrong, we were just talking about Trump with your former student, Juliet Kayyem, but it seems your view at this moment is that the president is flooding the zone with all these controversies and atrocities and kind of winning, while the Democrats are depending on the courts and the rule of law to rescue us and kind of losing.
Yes.
Is that where we are?
Yes.
Well,
and the Democrats have made a mistake going back to the first term in thinking that law can rescue the republic, and in fact, only politics can address the challenge, the threat that Donald Trump poses, which means that the Democratic Party, progressives generally, have to reimagine their mission and purpose in a way that reconnects, especially with working people without college degrees, who once constituted the base of the Democratic Party, but whom they've alienated in recent decades. They need a new political project.
You know, when people like you, Michael Sandel, say things like that, I think the average person, including me, says, oh, what he's saying is they have to really focus on the Carville, it's the economy, stupid. But you don't think the economy's enough?
No. I think partly it's the economy, and especially the widening inequalities of income and wealth of recent decades, which came about under both Democratic and Republican presidents who embraced a version of market-driven globalization that delivered great rewards to those at the top, especially the top 20%, but almost no improvement for the bottom half, who had stagnant wages for 5 decades, the median worker in real terms, jobs outsourced, but they added insult to injury. This is why it's more than the economy, Jim. It's not just economic inequality. It's inequality of social recognition and esteem, dignity, respect. One of the most potent sources of Trump's appeal is the sense of grievance among working people without college degrees who feel looked down upon by elites, who feel that their work isn't valued, that their voice doesn't matter. And Democrats and progressives have to figure out how to speak not only to the economic inequality, but also to the inequality of dignity, respect, honor, and esteem.
Who in the Democratic Party gets that message and acts upon it in a way that you would embrace?
Well, it remains to be seen. There have been strands, gestures in this direction. Remember Sherrod Brown from Ohio?
Yes.
Who's running again, even though he lost last time, is he not?
I
think he's planning on running for the Senate again, yeah.
Now, he emphasized the dignity of work. And I think any reimagined political project for progressives has to put the dignity of work at the center, to ask how to make life better for everyone who contributes to the economy and the common good, whether or not they have a college degree. So he would be one, Bernie Sanders on the economic issues,
Yeah.
issues of fairness, he addressed many of the grievances that Trump appealed to, and there was a surprising overlap in support, polls showed, between those who favored Bernie and those who voted for Trump. There was some overlap where what I think Bernie's agenda needs to be supplemented with goes beyond the economy and fairness to questions of community, belonging, membership, a politics of the common good. Fairness matters, economic inequality has to be addressed, but we also have to address, people are hungry for a politics that addresses what it is we share and owe one another as fellow citizens, which is the move from economic policies to a broader moral and civic project.
We're talking to Michael Sandel, who will be delivering a lecture tomorrow night in partnership with JFK Library and GBH's Forum Network. To get tickets or watch online, gbh.org/events.
Well, you talk, Michael Sandel, about how wokeism can seem arrogant to people. What did you mean by that?
Well, I didn't describe it as wokeism, though I can see how you would assimilate it and could assimilate it to it. But there is, I think, many working people feel when they feel looked down upon, it's because so much emphasis has been placed, such valorization of getting a degree. Because during the period of this growing economic inequality, the mainstream politicians who presided over this, Democrats and Republicans, did not address the inequality head on by saying, what did we do wrong by outsourcing jobs to low-wage countries and so on, and deregulating the financial industry, and doing the Wall Street bailout.
Well, Clinton and Obama.
They were part of this, as was George W. Bush. They said, if you want to compete and win in the global economy, go to college. What you earn will depend on what you learn. You can make it if you try. Now, it's a good thing to encourage people to get a college education, to go as far as they can with their studies, developing their talents. Was the insult implicit in it. Because if you're the insult was this: if you're struggling in the new economy and you didn't go to college, your failure must be your fault. You didn't do what we told you to do to improve yourself. So it's on you, not on us. And this, I think, is understandably galling to people who are contributing but who don't have degrees.
Do you go home at night some nights and say, I can't believe I have to tell Democrats that this is how you connect with real people? I'm not in any way belittling your brilliant research and work. It is so obvious what you're saying that it's pathetic. I mean, it's pathetic that they don't just do it, isn't it?
Well, it's interesting, Jim. It may seem obvious as we sit here discussing it and reflecting on what's gone wrong, but this has happened not only to the Democratic Party, which has alienated working people. At the same time, it became the party of the professional classes, the well-educated classes, who now vote Democratic, and those without degrees tend to vote Republican. It's happened in democracies around the world. It happened to Britain's Labour Party. The Brexit vote. The same year Donald Trump was elected, 2016, the first time. The vote for Brexit. Those without degrees voted to leave. Those with degrees and advanced degrees voted to remain. And then that pattern was replicated in our election. It's happened to the German Social Democrats, to the Social Democrats in France. So it is, though it may seem obvious, all of the center-left parties have become parties of the professional, credentialed classes, and this has opened the way for right-wing populist parties to capture working people without degrees.
Well, you know what the other thing is too. After the murder on the street by George Floyd, I think a lot of people were trying to compensate for the racism in America and how could somebody, a white cop, kill a black guy like this in the street and all that. And we talked a lot constantly about white privilege. We saw a film. It was on Frontline last night about poverty in America. Two white families and one black family, but you don't have to be, a Harvard philosopher to know that if you are a poor white family hearing about white privilege, you can get pretty ticked off by that.
Yes, and understandably so, because people who are struggling don't like to be called privileged. And they feel it as a kind of finger wagging.
Yeah.
Those of us who spend our days, Marjorie, in the company of the credentialed can easily forget a simple fact. Most of our fellow citizens don't have a four-year college
That's
degree.
right.
More than 60% do not. So it's folly to create an economy that sets as a necessary condition on dignified work and a decent life a four-year degree that most people don't have.
So, Michael Sandel, let me quote you to you, or at least paraphrase you to you a little bit more. Don't cede patriotism to the right. And you're nodding. I nodded when I've heard you say it or read it. What does that mean, though? How does one reclaim patriotism?
It's interesting that Democrats and progressives now are wary, suspicious of patriotism, even allergic to it because, understandably, they say, well, that's what right-wingers talk about. That's xenophobia. That's hostility to immigrants. And so they shrink, progressives do, from offering their own account of patriotism. It wasn't always this way. If we look back at center-left political parties in the Democrats in the United States, going back to FDR and the New Deal, the social democratic parties of Europe, they always emphasized solidarity, what it is to be a member of a political community with mutual obligations. This is the moral underpinning of the welfare state, of public provision of essential goods, health, education, transportation, security, retirement. But somewhere along the way, liberalism lost its connection with strong notions of national belonging, membership, allegiance, pride. And so this, I think, can be the beginning of a new progressive politics that doesn't only speak the language of individual rights, but also of the mutual obligations we have as fellow citizens, as participants in history and traditions which are contested, but then let's contest them, to prevent patriotism from becoming the monopoly of right-wing populist autocrats. That's dangerous. It's too potent a political sentiment and aspiration to cede to the authoritarian populist right.
Oh, it's so true. When you see a pickup truck go down the highway with a big American flag on it, you immediately assume it's a Trump. It's a Trump person. Yeah. But how do you do that, though? I mean, how do you get that communitarian kind of feel and the belonging kind of feel? How do you do that?
Well, here's one very concrete way we could begin, Marjorie. One of the most corrosive effects of the economic inequalities of recent decades has been to separate us in our everyday lives.
Yeah.
Well, those who are affluent and those of modest means increasingly live separate lives. We live and work and shop and play in separate places. We send our kids to different schools. This isn't good for democracy, and it's not good for a healthy sense of community. So one thing we need to do, and this is beyond national level politics, it's within civil society and state and local civil society and government. We need to rebuild class mixing institutions, public places and common spaces that bring people together from different walks of life in the ordinary course of their lives.
Like a library, for example.
Well, public libraries at the top of the list, along with public schools, but also seemingly more mundane places like public parks and recreation centers, municipal swimming pools, public transportation, sports stadia that gather people together across different classes and ethnic backgrounds. This is how, by bumping up against one another in the course of our everyday lives, this is how we learn to negotiate our differences, and this is how we come to care for the common good. So that would be a small-scale, local way within civil society of beginning to re-knit the moral and social fabric of a shared democratic life. And then beyond that, we need to speak about the economy from the standpoint not only of each individual's access to consumer goods, but also from the standpoint of building an economy hospitable to community, a sense of mutual obligations, and hospitable to self-government.
What do you think about the argument people like Ezra Klein made it? I think the book was called Abundance, that one of the problems for Democrats and democratic cities around the country is that we've made it really hard. We promise a lot. We promise daycare, we promise, pay, time off from work, parental leave, and all this kind of stuff, but we never seem to too hard to build housing with we have to have 17,000, permits and all this kind of stuff. And that's one of the frustrations. We talk and we don't produce.
I think that we need to produce concrete results on the ground. And there may be problems with too much red tape and too much bureaucracy and home construction, that kind of thing. And these are useful public policy prescriptions. But I don't think they add up to a new public philosophy for progressives. And that's what we have to keep our focus on. I think Democrats tend to be looking always for policy fixes, and there are plenty of ways in which we need policy fixes. But they also need something bigger, a reimagined moral and civic project that addresses the sense of disempowerment, the sense that people's voices don't matter, and the sense that community, the moral fabric of community has eroded.
It's hard to disagree with anything you're saying here, but for those who find that work too difficult or too complex, what so many people say is, well, we just have to make it through 3.5 more years, and that assumes the democracy will make it through 3.5 more years. I was at an event at Babson. Larry Ty, formerly of the Globe, does these beautiful health journalists a couple of weeks ago, and Nicole Hannah-Jones was speaking, and from the 1619 Project, obviously, and she was asked a question about in what does she have hope? And her response was, she paused and she said nothing. She said, what Donald Trump has done in 8 months, he has undone, and I forget the percentage, it was like 60% or something like that, of the 3 major civil rights laws that took decades and decades to build. And she said, I am of the belief that it will take us 60 to 70 years to recover from this Trump presidency. Are you part of the Hannah-Jones school of thinking, or are you a little bit more hopeful?
I think there is a basis for hope. I admire Nicole Hannah-Jones, and she was a guest speaker in my course a few years ago.
She's amazing. I'd never heard her speak before. It's amazing, yeah.
She's terrific. But I think she should not rule out hope so quickly.
Where do you find it?
Not by trying to figure out how Democrats can parry Donald Trump's latest outrage. I think that's the focus and the distraction. He's a master of distraction. And I think that the Democrats fall for that distraction too much and don't step back and ask, why is it that the public, if he's as dangerous as we think he is, why is it that the public went for him instead of what we have to offer? That's a hard question, and maybe an embarrassing question. I think the Democrats have to begin with a certain self-critical stance. We were implicated in those hyperglobalization policies that created the divide between winners and losers. And we were implicated in becoming the party more oriented to the values and the interests and the outlook of the well-educated professional classes, alienating working people. And here's where I would find hope. That wherever I go, it begins with students, young people. The ones I teach in my classroom, but also the ones I'm able to engage with when I travel around the world and have interactive lectures where I invite the students to offer their views on the big questions of the day. There is I find a great hunger among especially young people for a better kind of public discourse. We hear a lot about how students are intimidated to express their views. I don't see that. Given the opportunity, given a platform of reasoned public debate, students are hungry for engaging in public debate and argument with mutual respect on big questions, including questions of values, fraught questions, questions of justice. What should we do about inequality? What should be the role of money in markets in a good society? What do we owe one another as fellow citizens? They're hungry for this debate, which suggests that we have something to build on and tap into if we can find a way to connect with that energy and provide platforms for public discourse on big questions of a kind that we don't find on most media today, traditional media. It's certainly not on social media.
Are we part of the problem, the media here?
Yes. I mean, not this program.
Well,
but yes.
some days it is,
Yeah.
frankly.
That's right. It's Jim's fault.
No, I'm serious.
Yes, in general, the media, now talking before we get to social media, but the traditional media has failed to provide platforms for morally robust, engaged public discourse on big questions that matter. We don't do that. Instead, we see shouting matches and ideological food fights and quick snippets, and that tendency is only amplified and worsened when we turn to social media, where the business model depends on outraging people and feeding them insults that will keep them glued to their screens. So yes, the media needs to do a better job. We need to figure out how to rein in the effect of social media. And higher education needs to do a better job. I would not exempt the institution of which I'm a part of equipping students to be effective citizens, reasoning and arguing together about big, important, if controversial, public questions.
You know, Michael Sandel, even if you're right, your experience is such, you say students are the hope. Let's go one age group up. We talk a lot on the show about how meek this population is. You cite examples in another Western European country. They raised the annual tuition at public higher ed by $100, and there are 1 million people on the streets. If you share our perspective that most adults in this country are meek in their response to very damaging, destructive policies, what explains that?
There has to be an effective opposition. And simply responding to the daily outrage or tweet is not enough. And there have to be social movements built around platforms for public discussion and debate. I also think we need to reinvigorate forms of political participation. People don't feel that representative government of the kind we have now, where money largely buys elections, not only at the presidential level, but for Congress and at the state level. But so people are frustrated with the kind of representative government. I think we should experiment with citizen assemblies at the local level, where we would take some big issue and identify by lottery citizens from all different backgrounds in a community, let them deliberate for a year.
It's government by jury, essentially.
Well,
is that not
yes,
what it is?
extending the idea of a jury, which now if a jury can determine the guilt or innocence,
That's a wonderful point.
why can't a jury of citizens deliberate about how this or that community should deal with climate change, or the transition to a green economy, or the line between free speech and hate speech, but to do it in a way over time, informed by competing perspectives, and get some practice in the art. Tocqueville spoke about the New England township bringing the art of government into the sphere, the small sphere within our reach. So I think we need to recover something like that and maybe experiment with a proliferation of citizen assemblies, and maybe if it works, if it inspires real political participation and a better kind of public discourse, maybe we should push for a constitutional amendment that would have one house be elected and the other house consisting of a rotating citizen assembly selected by lottery. What do you think of that?
I think that's a wonderful idea.
You like that?
Actually, I would love to have big groups of people in there discussing all the issues. But also, I mean, it's what you said before too about mixing. I'm struck by how much what we spoke with Bob Putnam earlier in the week, the bowling alone guy, and he talked about yeah, he was talking about that we don't talk about moral issues like we used to. We're not as honest as we used to be. I don't know if you agree with that. But the idea of getting this together with talking about these big moral issues or going to more places where we can meet with people that are not like us, who's gonna organize that? I don't know.
Well, we have to figure that out, but it's on us. And by us, I include the media, I include higher education, I include the political parties, but don't want to rely on them. I also would include the kinds of social movements that historically have enabled citizens to come together, to reason together, and to invigorate self-government.
Are you going to be this good tomorrow night, or do you just you spend it all right here? You'll be good tomorrow?
I hope people will come.
We hope people should come. Michael, it's a joy to spend time with you. Thanks so much for sharing your thoughts.
Yeah, thank you.
Great to be with you.
Michael
Thank you
Sandel.
very much, Michael Sandel.